We will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the third and final panel in today's 1619 Impact Showcase. As you're coming in, feel free to introduce yourself to the host and panelists here in the chat. We'd love to know where you're joining from. And those of you that have been here for a few panels know that today is a celebration of 5 years of partnership between the Pulitzer Center and the 1619 Project, including opportunities to partner with incredible educators like our panelists today. I thank you, Manda from DC, for joining us, Hannah also, for joining us, and Hannah will help communicate messages between panelists and the chat. Um, My name is Donnelly Jamna. I'm a senior program manager on the Pulitzer Center K-12 education team, and I manage our 1619 education programs. I'll be your moderator for the session today. Welcome, Petra from New York. Before we begin, I want to take a minute to briefly introduce the Pulitzer Center and to make sure everyone is clear on our logistics for the showcase today. The Pulitzer Center's mission is to champion the power of stories to make complex issues relevant and inspire action. We do this in collaboration with journalists, educators, and other organizational partners like the New York Times Magazine and the 1619 Project. The Pulitzer Center believes that journalism can be a key element for mobilizing society and that the people and communities who actively engage with systemic challenges will find solutions together. This slide captures the center's five main journalistic focus areas at this time, and our partnership with the 1619 Project sits within our human rights, racial justice programming. Our programming today is a celebration of the work completed by our most recent program partners, our 1619 Impact grantees. These grantees have engaged deeply with the 1619 Project, utilizing and building on the project as a part of the transformative work they do. In the case of this panel, this is work that's been done with students in classroom spaces in and out of school time. They are classroom teachers, administrators, graduate students, professors, after-school program professionals, and museum directors. We're here to showcase their learning, programming, and impact. Following this panel, we will close our day with a keynote address from Pulitzer Center education partner and professor of social studies education, Dr. LeGarrette King. Please note the transition time between the panels and prioritize attending that closing session. You will be able to use the same link to rejoin for the closing keynote. Your voice is important to us, and we want to stay connected to the conversation by posing questions. So please do submit your questions utilizing our Q&A function. If you have a question for a specific panelist, include their name so that we can direct it to them. And we'll try to get to as many as we can during the Q&A portion of the event. If you're looking to access the session guide or any other information about this showcase, you should be able to access it through the Zoom event lobby. And now it's my honor to welcome our panelists. I'm going to invite each of you to introduce yourself before we go into presentation.
Hi, I'm Tamika Morant. I'm calling in from Washington, D.C.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kayla Cato Piercings, and I am tuning in from New York.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nia Lundquist. I use she, her pronouns. I am, my organization, Kingmakers of Oakland, is located in Oakland, California. I'm the curriculum designer for Kingmakers of Oakland.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stacy Smith. I am the Director of Culturally Responsive Curriculum and Training from Kingmakers of Oakland, and I am dialing in from Oakland adjacent Alameda, serving Oakland and the Bay Area.
Thank you all. And we're very excited for your presentations. And I believe we're starting with Dr. Morant.
Yes. All right. So in 2023, my school was part of the 1619 Project Education Network, and we wrote a curriculum using the 1619 resources for pre-kindergarten through fifth grade. And during our first year of implementation, which was school year 23-24, we saw large support for implementation of the curriculum, and some families and staff engaged in providing feedback on the implementation for curriculum revision. However, we noticed a significant gap in engagement with our Latinx community, and we noticed some teachers were relying heavily on the lesson plans for implementation, but were teaching more from a point of compliance rather than investment. Therefore, we set this project up with the intent of meeting 3 goals. 1, we wanted to rally the entire school community around the significance, importance, and urgency of teaching the 1619 project to children. We wanted them to not only know about the work we were doing, but be active in championing its inclusion in our school curriculum. 2, we wanted to build the capacity of the school community, adults, that's staff and families, to understand the 1619 project itself, the curriculum, and the related student projects so they could better support the cultivation of students' critical consciousness. Then 3rd, we wanted to strengthen our communal bonds. We wanted to build and strengthen relationships, camaraderie, and solidarity within our school community, especially understanding how, even in the present day, we all remain affected by the legacy of slavery. Next slide. The project featured 3 components: text talks, community teach-ins, and the celebration of learning. Another critical part of the project, though, was ensuring that all members of our community were able to engage meaningfully with the 1619 project resources. Therefore, the first task we undertook was translating some of the 1619 texts into Spanish. Also, the National Gallery of Art, who's one of our community partners, supported our initiative by purchasing a Spanish copy of the Born on the Water text for each of our students so that they were able to have class sets of the Born on the Water text in both languages. The next undertaking, of course, was our text talk. And the purpose of the text talks were to better understand the 1619 resources, engage in discussions about the text and the related topics, and build the capacity of the adults across our diverse community in understanding this is not just a Black issue or teaching Black history, but that the project is ultimately about the shared legacy of slavery in all of our lives, particularly those from historically marginalized communities. So our staff engaged in text talks at monthly staff meetings, and then we followed each staff meeting with a family night with families and community members, and some teachers also stayed and attended their text talk too. In order to make it more accessible for families and staff, the text talks always began with a thinking routine, analyzing a piece of art that was connected to the topic of the text. So for example, we paired Great America by Kerry James Marshall with the 1619 poem. We then engaged in discussion about the text, answering text-based questions, analyzing instructional implications, and making personal connections. Then finally, at the community text talks, we engaged in a related art project from the curriculum with the families. So for example, families wrote "We Are" family poems, which were similar to the "I Am" poems that our 4th and 5th grade students write. That use of bilingual resources and visual thinking routines created space for deep engagement and differing perspectives. It also created more equitable partnerships between home and school because home adults now had access to the same information and training as the school adults, and the learning was cognitively demanding for both of them. Next slide. Our students, of course, played a central role in the project. They drove through the learning with their inquiry and their collaboration. As part of our 1619 project curriculum, students engaged in studying the poems from Born on the Water and other 1619 resources, unpacking the text and making connections between their identities and the identities of others. By engaging in project-based learning, including thinking routines, posing questions, engaging in discussions, and creating projects to represent their learning, they took ownership of that process. This active engagement was evident in the excitement during discussions, their projects, and the pride they displayed during the celebration of learning. So the celebration of learning is a culminating assessment or like event of the quarter when 100% of our students in grades preschool through 5th grade publish and present their project-based learning projects to the entire school community. In addition to presenting, students toured the different exhibits to learn from one another and reflect on how it relates to their own learning. This year, though, for the first time, we had families present the projects that they created at Text Talk. And it was really powerful to see the student learning and the families learning together about the same topics publicly displayed in the school. Next slide. The final part of our project were 2 community teach-ins. First, we co-hosted educator-focused teach-in with the National Gallery of Art at the National Gallery of Art. It was provided a space for educators and caregivers to explore the 1619 project resources and analyze the complementary art within the gallery that can be paired with the 1619 project resources to increase accessibility for all ages, abilities, and interests. Participants walked away with books, including a copy of Born on the Water, art posters, and teaching resources. What energized us most, though, was witnessing participants begin to take ownership of the project by presenting at the teach-ins. So, for example, at our second community teach-in, we had a grandmother, a father, and a teacher from our school community all give presentations whose topics included things like the legacy of anti-Blackness and Latine culture, the importance of activism and solidarity, and the importance of fighting for diverse texts and the teaching of hard truths like slavery and racism in elementary school. We also had students from our Student Government Association teach the participants about the importance of not only land acknowledgements, but labor acknowledgements as well. And we had a Native American scholar, like a guest speaker, presented on the shared legacies of slavery and engaged participants in reflecting on the parallels between enslavement and indigenous exploitation in their ancestral lands, and how art has been used by both Black and indigenous people to talk about race and racism, which fostered a deeper understanding of the shared legacy and resilience. So by integrating storytelling, art, and participatory discussions, it enabled participants to see overlaps between their community struggles and their contributions. Next slide. Our ultimate goal was just to bring together our diverse community to create a transformative learning space that emphasized the enduring legacies of slavery, the modern day implications, and collective action. What made the project, I think, especially powerful was its combination of historical analysis, community empowerment, and the creative expression to foster critical analysis and solidarity. We're going to continue our monthly text talks through at least the end of this school year. For our Q3, which is based on advocacy and is grounded in the Black Lives Matter at School principles, we are planning a collaborative project that integrates the 1619 resources and engages families, staff, and students. And because the interest by teachers in helping co-write the remaining part of our 1619 project curriculum has intensified, it justifies keeping the 1619 project an integral part of our professional learning community. So as a community, it excites me that we'll continue to learn and grow together, because ultimately it's our collaboration between home and school that will have the greatest impact on student learning. That's it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moran. And I ought to go back one really quickly so folks can read these quotes, at least one or two before we transition to the next thing. I'll pass it over to Stacey and me.
Good afternoon. Evening for some, afternoon here in California. So grateful to be able to speak to you today. I want to give you a little background. At Kingmakers of Oakland, we envision a world where all Black boys and men are celebrated for their beauty, brilliance, and innate greatness as kings who see their own worth and are empowered to reach their fullest potential. Our mission is to transform systems of education, culture, and wellness while shifting narratives to celebrate Black people and culture across the diaspora. We aim to dismantle toxic systems through improving educational and life outcomes for Black boys from pre-K to PhD. So we aspire to build a thriving network of kings who will lead today and inspire those that come after them to lead in the future. So basically, we're changing the narrative from the inside out. So this work is done by empowering through instilling knowledge of African history, strengthening cultural identity, and igniting AI, which we call ancestral intelligence. We nurture collective responsibility by emphasizing intergenerational learning and community support, which we got to see through this project, and we're still seeing. We instill learning skills, leadership skills to build self-efficacy and elevate healing and belonging in spaces that are safe for Black boys. One of the ways we have made this impact in students and classrooms is through our Crowns curriculum, a course that we've designed to empower Black boys by fostering a deeper connection to their positive cultural identity. Here's our unit titles: From Me to We, Building Our Community, Relationship to Blackness, Mafa and Sankofa, Strategies of Success, Resistance and Revolution, and finally, Afrofuturism. Mafa and Sankofa holds the King's Legacy Project, where we've included and infused the 1619 project materials. The lesson sequence begins with a museum that represents the rich empires across the African continent. It goes on through the Middle Passage, where kings became a commodity, to their enslavement and resistance in the Americas, and culminates with an introduction to Pan-Africanism. So there was a lot of integration that took place to get to the 1619 project for us. So keep listening and you'll hear more about the project. Nia.
So at Kingmakers of Oakland, we partner with different districts to implement our Crown's curriculum in schools. So as a curriculum designer, I wanted to find a way to incorporate the 1619 materials and make them central texts for our lessons about the transatlantic slave trade. And in order to demonstrate the students' understanding and really tap into their creativity, I thought the best way to do this was to address the myths that the students had been learning, whether it was in schools, through their families, friends, communities, even online. Our students are starting to learn about slavery way before we officially teach them. And so we wanted to address those myths that might start coming up. So an example of some of those myths could be that Black people did very little to resist enslavement, or that enslaved African people didn't really know anything about the world around them when they were enslaved. Both of those things are very false and actually really dangerous to the understanding of who we are and who we've always been. So the rationale really behind this was to equip them to combat these myths, not only with the truth, but the evidence of the truth, to be able to say, not only do I know that myth is not true, I know why it's not true. I know where the true narrative comes from, and I can tell you a story that embodies that true narrative, which is where our creative piece comes in. So let's say a student chose the myth that Black people did very little to resist enslavement. A student could create a comic book style, a graphic novel style depiction of a Black person resisting enslavement. So we entitled the project The King's Legacy as a demonstration of the continuum of greatness that is innate in our Black boys, and to demonstrate that being a king or a kingdom goes beyond status, wealth, money, power, and even freedom. When we look at who our ancestors were when they were enslaved and how they liberated themselves, the actions, the character, the community, the resilience are all demonstrations of what it means to be a king. And a king is how we refer to all of our Black boys, all of our students. And so we wanted to demonstrate that it's not that we used to be kings before enslavement, but we've always been kings. And so the King's legacy is just not about how we ruled, it's also how we fought back. So that's the rationale for the project. Our next step was then to train our facilitators on the materials and the relevant history to make sure that they were confident and equipped to be able to speak from a place of knowingness, but also think about the ways that they have been taught and mistaught. Our fourth step was to support the classroom implementation. So we have kings from grades 6 through 12 doing this project. And so in different school districts throughout the country. So the way that this was getting implemented was going to vary from class to class. So we want to give them hands-on support and are continuing to give them hands-on support with the project. And our final step is to compile the anthology of this project, of their student work. The next slide, please. Thank you. So these are some highlighted results from this pre-surveys that we did, both with our facilitators and with our students. The survey was intended to get a sense of what our facilitators and our students' prior knowledge was, how they had been learning about enslavement prior to taking this course or prior to teaching this course, where they've gotten their information from, what their perception was of the myths that we presented, because some of the myths may be things that we think are obvious. Some of those myths are things that many of us don't actually know the truth about until we do more research. And so, as you can see, these are the results of, how they rated their knowledge, what they felt like they knew before, what they still feel like they need to learn. Half of our facilitators were not familiar with the 1619 project. So a lot of the novelty really was just introducing them to all the materials and the wealth of information and research and resources that can be utilized in their classrooms. And as you can see, the majority of students were not familiar, which we expected as well with the 1619 project. This last chart is a demonstration of one of the myths, one that I mentioned earlier, but one of the myths that we selected to make sure that we disprove in our curriculum and in the project that enslaved people were unaware of the politics and events of American society they lived in. This is really important because a lot of us are taught, that enslaved people couldn't read, they couldn't write, and sometimes that translates into they weren't present, or they couldn't hear, or they weren't participants and active in their own freedom, and that freedom was something given to them, not earned. And so these served as the basis in our facilitator trainings to debunk these myths in real time and engage in really deep and informative discussions about what our prior knowledge is and how we can continue to grow. And with our students, it allows us to understand what steps we have to continue to take with them.
I know that was a lot. Thank you so much for listening. And this is just a sliver of all the things we're doing at Kingmakers. There's a couple of QR codes you can scan if you want to learn more about the Crowns curriculum. And also, if you just want to see if Kingmakers is something that fits into your organization, that aligns with your mission and vision, whether it's a school site, like your program, Dr. Tamika, there's an opportunity perhaps that we can have a conversation about that. So I know time is limited, so I just want to give you these ways to access us again in the future, and can't wait to see how we continue the day. Thank you, DJ.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, we have one more presentation before our Q&A portion.
Hello, everyone. My name is Norca Blackman Richards, and I'm presenting here with my colleague, Kayla Cato Pierce. We had the wonderful honor of being able to use the 1619 project to prepare incoming high school seniors who are coming into college into a bridge program as their first experience before going into college. The 1619 project's reframing of American history and the arrival of the first enslaved African people served for us as a compelling lens through which we could view the transformation of admissions at the City University of New York, CUNY. A lesser known narrative in the same way in which the 1619 project is a lesser known narrative in American history, is that African Americans push this nation towards greater justice, respect for civil rights and human rights, in the same way in which the children and the grandchildren, great-grandchildren of these pushed CUNY to embrace diversity and open admissions. So despite being a public institution situated in an urban environment as New York is, CUNY's student population was predominantly white, over 90%, up to 1966. In 1966, a group of Black activists and legislators, among them Shirley Chisholm, Percy E. Sutton, Charles Rangel, and many others, advocating before the New York legislature to open an access program so that more Black and brown high school seniors could attend CUNY. This led to the creation of a program that is called the SEEK program, which is still alive today as the oldest opportunity program in the nation. These students, in turn, after being admitted in 1966, in 1969, these students then lead a takeover, which is called the largest takeover of a college campus in American history. They lead a takeover forcing CUNY to revisit and change their admissions policies so that their demographics could look like the New York City public schools and admit more Black and brown students. This summer, in 2024, the SEEK program at Queens College, of which I'm the director and Kayla also works there, we introduced the 1619 project using the Hulu docuseries, the interactive magazine, and we complemented it with the documentary that came out last year of the story of the history of this takeover of the City College by Sikh students. The documentary is entitled The Five Demands, and it is a production of Jezebel. Now, this film documents in real, because they were able to get raw footage from the NYPD, the New York Police Department, how these Black students and Puerto Rican students took over the entire campus for quite some weeks, forcing CUNY to revisit their admissions policies. Now, this initiation of the 1619 project history and also the takeover of the City College for us was critical for students to understand the history from whence they come, right? And we use 5 themes. We use the origin, struggles, demands, reparation, progress, and Black joy to create a timeline for students and highlight these historical advancements. If we go to the next slide, we see the culmination of this summer event that we had for students. We had students divided into groups, and we had them discuss after they were done with their summer program. They had about a month before school started their first freshman semester, and they then went home and researched and came up with their groups and presented the symposium, and they focused on the following 5 questions. How can the racial wealth gap in America be repaired? How could expanding the truth of American history to include truth about slavery help the current social tensions in America today? In what ways has Black culture contributed to American culture? How could the current educational system in America be reimagined with a charter for a new 5 demands for New York City public schools? And what are the continued contributions of Black creatives that have shaped American culture? And examples of Black joy, regardless of the lack of recognition. It was simply amazing to hear these young people share their research, share their insights, share their viewpoints based on their experience in the summer. I will tell you this, that the young people that have come, the summer program has run for 58 years. And most staff members and faculty have said to me that this year, with the incorporation of 1619 paired with that 5 demands, is the first time that they've seen students so confident, so willing to discuss and engage in difficult topics in college because of their experience of the 1619. Kayla, time is yours.
Good afternoon, all. Yes, my name is Kayla Cato Pierce-Saints, and I'm a professor at Queens College in the Africana Studies Department, the SEEK department, as well as College Now. So every fall, I teach a course called The Making of the Black Race and Racism in U.S. Pop Culture. And in this course, what we do is we dissect what race is as a social construct rather than a biological concept, and then how that influenced what we see in pop culture today. So I'm going to read you the objective of my course and how I revamped it to include the 1619 project. So this course is designed as a survey of the Black image within popular culture. This course interrogates the roots of African-American stereotypes within North American culture by examining and studying the 1619 project through an understanding of history. We will assess how these stereotypes have evolved over time and the role they have played in constructing and positioning African Americans in American society. So at the top, there's a little chart. I took it from my syllabus just to show you. So my students, this was the required text on the syllabus this semester, which is the new, the 1619 project, the new origin story. And on the left side of the chart, it shows the topics. And on the right side, I show the chapters that we reviewed. So for example, if we start off the course, again, dissecting what race is as a social construct of means and power. And then I related it to the origins part of the book that talks about the erasure of Black Americans. Then we get into chattel slavery, which I then use the democracy chapter of the 1619 project as it relates to slavery as an institution. Then once we get through the foundations of race, as well as slavery and enslavement, we then get into topics such as Black women on TV, Black women on TV, Black women in the media, Black women on film. And we related this to the race chapter of the 1619 Project book because it talks about the exploitation, sexual violence, and the degradation of Black women and their bodies. And we talk about the 3 caricatures, which is the Mammy, the Jezebel, and the Sapphire caricature. Then we move on to hip hop music and rap music, which the students always love. And we paired it with the music chapter of the 1619 Project, as that talks about how Black enslavement led to Black artistic innovation and influence on American culture. Since early in the semester, we talked about how Black women are portrayed in the media. We then get into how Black men are portrayed in the media. And we specifically go over the boogeyman caricature, the boogeyman, the Black boogeyman stereotype of how Black men are always portrayed as the gangster on TV, as the thug. And then I related it to the fear chapter of the 1619 Project book, as it talks about policing practices and organized violence in response to the perpetual fear of Black people. And then lastly, at the end of the semester, we kind of wrap up the semester of all the topics that we talked about, and we related to the justice chapter, as that outlines how Black people have had their labor and wealth and also their creativity, their bodies, and their music stolen. So that's a guideline of how I break down my course. And at the bottom, we had a Pulitzer journalist, Ashanti Ford, join my classroom, and she talked about how her role in being a reporter and a journalist, and how she also goes through seeing how Black people and Black Americans are typecasted and stereotyped on in reports and over the news. Next slide, please. And then to end the semester, so here in New York, the semester just ended, so this was actually on Thursday. I gave the students a 1619 archival project to complete. I attended one of the 1619 conferences from the Pulitzer Center back in February, and I specifically tuned into a archivist who spoke, and I really got inspiration from her. So this is the objective of their project. Students were instructed to create an archival project and then author a paper connecting one of the themes from the 1619 project that we went over throughout the semester: democracy, race, music for justice, music for justice, to their then archival project. And I gave the students 4 projects to choose from. They could either do a scrapbook, a family member interview, create a music playlist, or lastly, a photo album. So starting on the far left, my student that is holding 2 things in her hands, she chose to do the scrapbook, where she included many images of her family history, and what she is holding in her hand is the actual deed of the home that her grandparents own in the Dominican Republic. My next student in the orange hoodie, he actually did the family member interview. And in this interview, his mom spoke of when she came from Nigeria, her first time witnessing and how she witnessed police brutality. He said that within the first week or so that she arrived in America is when she first viewed that encounter, and how she talked about how police interactions are different in Nigeria and how they are here in America. My third student, he chose to do the music playlist, and he created a playlist, and he titled it, I don't know if you can see it, but he titled it The Sound of Black. And he chose a bunch of different artists and songs that related to the Black experience, as well as all the topics and themes that we talked about throughout the semester. He headlined his music playlist to say this, and he said he got his inspiration specifically from the music chapter of the 1619 Project New Origin Story book. It says, Blackness has no one definition. It is colorful, it is expressive, it is innovation, it is pride, it is revolution, it is electric. Blackness is music to the ears. And lastly, the last student on the right, she chose to do the photo album. And in this book, the theme that she related hers to was democracy as well as justice. And in this book, she had a lot of pictures of her mom. And the reason why she had a lot of pictures of her mom is because her family originates from Mexico, and there was a lot of gang violence going on in the village in which her family came from. So her mom actually swam from Mexico to California, and that is how they got to the United States. So we really enjoyed using the 1619 project throughout the course of the semester, because students were able to take a deep dive into their family history and then share their stories.
Didn't need to go that far. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop this screen share because it is now time for our moderated discussion. And I'm just still so amazed and appreciative of the work that each of you did here. So we do have I have a few questions that I prepared, and there are a few coming in through the chat here that we'll make sure we get to as well. To start, each of your projects is just so based within the needs and the history of your communities, your school communities, your local communities. Why was it important to you to have your communities engage with the 1619 materials and resources? I know you've touched on it a bit, but wanted to open the space if anyone wanted to share more on that specific point. And yes, Norca.
Hi. As the director of an opportunity program, oftentimes students come into the program with many preconceived notions. They think they're not smart enough. They think that because I'm poor, they're giving me this opportunity, but I really don't belong in this space. It was critical for them to see the history of the peoples that have set up justice in this country and pair that with what some young people like themselves did in 1969 to grant them the opportunity to come into this space through the opportunity program. So I believe that providing our students with not only confidence, but also the knowledge of that background made a significant difference in their lives.
Thank you. And Stacy, I see your hand as well.
And just to tag into that, beyond the student perspective, we are also educating our teachers who will teach future generations of students. So not only is this a single occurrence of training and elevating knowledge of this project embedded into the lessons in the unit, I talked about a couple of them. I didn't mention the hypocrisy of our democracy is a lesson in the middle of this where we kick all this in. So we're tying into what other people are saying as well. Thank you to Sister Nia for just tagging into those things that are highlighting these things that we think are structured in such a way that are not, so that the adults and the communities that they reside in and continue to teach in are also impacted long-term, as well as the students' voices and mindsets and the narrative shift, again, from the inside out, all the lives that are touched as a result.
Thank you. Michaela?
Yes, thank you. So the director of Africana Studies at Queens College shared with me that there was a time when the Africana Studies program was non-existent. There was no one directing it and there was no one teaching in the program. And so this semester, being able to integrate the 1619 project with the teaching, we were also able to collaborate with many community members. We collaborated with the council members of the Louis Armstrong House, which is a museum that shows the archives of Louis Armstrong and his wife and their work. And we're also able to collaborate with the director of the Godwin Turnback Museum on campus. And so in doing these many different projects with members of our campus community, the 1619 project has helped us contribute to the reactivation of the Africana Studies program.
That's amazing. Thank you. Dr. Morant, did you want to speak to this one? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's just like our community, because we created this curriculum, I think it was really important for everybody to know and understand it, because it had a lot to do with how students, when they asked questions, what the response was going to be. And also we wanted to make sure that students were hearing the same things at home and at school. And we have, our community is 65% Latine, and that they don't always have the strongest background, this particular community, of Black history. And so sometimes they would communicate things that were inaccurate, or students would come in with some language that was inappropriate. And so we needed to really be on the same page as a community about what we are, who we are, and how we communicate with one another.
Thank you. So I'm going to combine a question I had on here already and one of our questions from our audience. The question I had was just speaking to the fact that though your projects centered on students, they also required you to train, to educate the adult educators, with you, the folks that were facilitating your programs. And so I have one question about what were the challenges and or surprises that occurred during that adult learning stage of your work. And we have an audience question from Makisha about if there's anything you personally learned about yourself through your participation with the 1619 project and how that's impacted you.
Yeah, I'll actually go ahead and start with that one. We conducted trainings, like we mentioned before, with some of our facilitators. And when we did that, we also did the survey in real time. So we were able to see the results of what they had been learning previously, any misconceptions they had, and we were able to talk about that in real time. So it was amazing to see just how much prior knowledge a lot of them had and how much they were sitting on it and waiting to talk about it and waiting to unleash. We had certain facilitators who just brought the wealth of knowledge into the room. And it was also really important for us to see where some of those misconceptions have just never been corrected. For example, that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, or that the Civil War was just about states' rights, and to be able to talk about that in real time felt really, really important to do, and to be able to make art teaching not about just our personal learning and our personal journey, but like our collective learning and our collective genius. Having that moment was really, really critical in the success of our project. And in terms of Sister Makisha's question, thank you for that. Things that I learned about myself in the project, I think we're in an age of misinformation, and how important the truth is, and how important not only being able to look for and find the truth, but to know the truth within yourself, how critical that is both for our facilitators and for our students, and realizing how important that is in the curriculum writing and the work that we do at Kingmakers.
Thank you so much, Norca.
Yeah, the summer program at Queens College through the SEEK program has been around for almost 60 years, right? That was part of the legislation that students would get a pre-college experience. So the focus has always been on math, English, bolstering their skills, and on college advising. Adding this particular piece with the 1619 and the 5 demands is really an innovation that had never occurred before. So when we shared it with staff, most people were welcoming of it. They thought, oh, this is great. Students are going to learn about the Sikh history and about the real history of the United States. But we had one particular instructor, which was a math instructor. When students went to her class, apparently they were leaving our class still discussing the topics from the course. And she didn't take well to it. She then proceeded to email me and told me that in the future, it would be best that we not focus on topics like these. They should be optional, because students really need more heavy content like math and English, and not necessarily something that's going to drain them emotionally, as she said, and exhaust them, and really create this sense of despair, she said, in them. But what we found was totally the opposite. What we found was that students became confident. They were able to tag themselves onto a history that they did not understand before, and now they had a connection to it. They were able to build a sense of pride from it. We partnered with one of our sociology professors, Professor Kulu, so she was in the classroom with us. I personally feel, and I share this with Donnelly, I feel that I found a missing link. After years of directing this program and running the summer program and organizing, I feel that this was the missing link to give students that oomph that they needed to not only move forward into the fall semester, but to move forward. I see a much more confident, happier, more self-assured group of students, thanks to the opportunity for the 1690 project.
I think relatedly, some of the challenges we had was just values and beliefs. People believing that elementary school children were too young to learn about these things. They weren't able to make sense of it. That's one thing. But then the other part too is this is extra for teachers. Like in 2023, DC came out with some new social studies standards that has slavery in it. And that was nice, but it didn't come with any resources. And so teachers started to see it as just one more thing for them to teach and one more thing for them to do without any support. And so one thing we really tried to do was give them the support so that they wouldn't feel like that we were just adding on one more thing. Instead of adding one more thing, we're asking you to do what you do differently in a way that is more inclusive of the actual truth and history. And we used the Learning for Justice Teaching Hard History standards were really helpful in that, because again, it tells you very specifically what a fifth grader can know and do, what a second grader can know and do. And so that was really helpful, I think, with our school community, with the teachers.
Thank you so much. Yes, Stacey, where are you going?
Very short. Our theme for training for our facilitators is engage, encourage, empower. So that sequence of that engagement, both at the teacher level and the student level, then you're dealing in that space of handling the emotions of the hard truths and then empowering them to go forth because of the truth because of an understanding, because of owning it and being able to display that. I think the curriculum was critical to having that piece in there for within context. And that was something that we were very, very intentional about.
Thank you. We did have a question here about from Manda, who works at a predominantly white school with and runs a Black girls group. Manda's wondering how you can incorporate some of these projects with the girls and if the plans are available. I see, Stacy, you already put a sort of answer in here about where folks can find the Crowns curriculum from Kingmakers. We also have lots of units, lesson plans, resources on our Pulitzer Center site, 1619education.org. But I wanted, and that's, all you can search by grade level, you can search by subject area. If you've been listening to some of the panels today, folks have managed to incorporate those lessons, many of which were written for classroom spaces, into other types of educational spaces. But I wanted to pose a question in case you all had additional resources to add, beyond the 1619 site, maybe a resource that was useful to you to share, now before we go to our next question.
For us in the construction of our curriculum, I mentioned for the Learning for Justice, Teaching Hard History standards were really helpful for us. And then also the Howard Project Zero thinking routines were really helpful for us. It was a way to engage students in thinking routines that were age appropriate, but again, in either text or visual text, pictures, to have these deep discussions. So those were two resources that we leaned on a lot in our construction of our curriculum.
Thank you. I know, Norca and Kayla, you were working with the older, the older bunch, but
yeah, I know we work with younger kids, and I think we definitely tried. It was helpful that the 1619 project had media so that we were able to look into the podcasts for a little bit of the older kids. I think some of the younger kids, sixth graders, it's a little harder for them. It's like talk radio. So there's a little bit more engagement that we have to kind of add in there for them. But it's still possible, and it still has been done even with our sixth graders to use the videos for those who are able to access Hulu in their classrooms. We had some facilitators who just loved the work of the 1619 project and did deep dive in those resources. So definitely looking at some of those more visual aspects of it has been helpful for us.
Thank you. Kayla, did you want to add to this?
Sure, I don't mind. So we don't work with K through 12. We work with college students and incoming freshmen. But if anyone is interested in teaching pop culture, there is a book called Are You Entertained by Simone Drake. I use that book in my class often. And it also has historical context when talking about Black pop culture topics. So it actually seamlessly goes with the 1619 project. Are You Entertained by Simone Drake.
Thank you. I have a question here that connects to one that also came in through the chat around what advice you would give to others who are interested in undertaking similar projects. What key lessons would you share? And Chris offered here in the chat just, the context and framing of going into well, we're already in a moment where this work is being challenged. We've talked through that in many panels today. And teachers are anticipating that some of those challenges might become more difficult. So, given that context, what advice do you have for others who are interested in undertaking similar projects and who are interested in making sure that this type of content and curriculum is accessible and available? Oh, I love Miss Dr. Do you want to speak to it a little bit?
I can. Sorry, I forgot to answer the question about one thing I learned about myself. And I think I needed to reimagine failure and my understanding of failure. I realized that it was very much tied to white supremacy. Like I'd write these agendas and we'd have these plans. And if we didn't get to all the plans, I'd be really feeling bad. Like, oh my God, this was a failure. We didn't hit half of these points and that's not good. But really what I needed to do is celebrate our flexibility and that we were responsive to the participants and we let them lead our agenda instead of actually trying to like push down their throat what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. We didn't necessarily follow the agenda and stop after 10 minutes. If they wanted to talk for 30 minutes, it was okay. And we just went ahead and talked for 30 minutes. And so I think one thing I realized about myself is the way I was conceptualizing and understanding success and failure was more tied to white supremacy than I would have liked it to have been.
Thank you.
Can I just say ashe on that, first of all? Because that was the things that we went through was like, they're not doing it when we say they're, we wanted them to. And we really had to take a step back, having been a teacher, knowing all the demands that come in, and especially contextually, if people are still learning some of the things that they're needing to teach, they need the space, the time, the safety, the grace to internalize that which they're teaching so that they can embody it to teach it and make it relevant for the students and then hold space for them. Some of the things that kids will be hearing through this learning is brand new knowledge, way more horrific than they ever anticipated. And so it was giving that space and grace, understanding contextually what was happening in the school cycles, trying to make this deadline when school was just starting and all the things teachers have to do. So it was really knowing that our plan had to fit into a bigger scope and to give grace for that.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about January 2025, what's going to happen? How is it going to change? And in particular, because I work in a program that based on Project 2025 should not exist. But then I think about how could I go back to how things were? I have to move forward. And I cannot imagine now running a program without that piece attached to it. So I think we have to go forth fearlessly and take from scripture, the truth shall make you free. So I don't feel any fear about the future. Resources may be lacking, but I believe that this truth that we are holding on to, we need to continue. This is the time to be able to share that fearlessly with our students and with everyone.
Thank you so much, Nia. Yeah.
And just to the point of Dr. Morant, in addition to redefining failure, I think also redefining success is important too, because it's interesting. As a curriculum writer, what I'm essentially doing is creating a plan. And it's a little antithetical to the way that I live my life. I think of planning as putting together all the knowledge and intentions you have and saying, okay, this is what I want to do. It's not about what's going to happen, but this is what I want to do. And I felt the curriculum kind of works in a similar way of this is our intention, this is what we want to happen in the classrooms. But the success of how it actually lands is about what is resonating with the students and what the students need. And so in training our facilitators, a big piece of advice was, let the students lead the learning, let the students lead the success of this, let them show you what they need the most, because, the curriculum predicts a lot of things, but your students may surprise you. They may add something to this. They may find successes in step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of evolution, of growth, of knowledge. And so let what they learn in step 1 be the success of the class, if that is really what the success of the class is to them, because the students are first and it's their learning that we're here for ultimately. So finding new ways to continue to prioritize and embody what it means to put our students first.
Thank you so much. Kayla, did you want to add?
Just to piggyback off what Norca said when she said she cannot envision teaching the SEEK program without the 1619 resource now. And I do feel the same way about my course. In the beginning of the semester, I was a bit nervous about teaching it just because I didn't know how the students would respond to it. And so at the end of the semester, this past week, I asked the students if, next week during finals week, they can turn in their books to me because I want to use it next semester to continue teaching the course. And they all said that they don't want to give the book back. And I was just so shocked because if you know anything about college students, they can care less about textbooks, but they refuse to give it back. So I've learned that students are hungry for the truth. And when they have it, they want to run with it. I actually had a meeting with one student, and she said that she's actually using this book for one of her fashion classes and one of her science classes. So it's exciting to see that they are taking it outside of my class and again running with it. So yeah.
Thank you. I would love to see that passion project. And it's a really great transition to what I think might be our final question here, about the meaningful moments you've shared from your work. What is there another sort of anecdote or moment of student impact that excites you? What do you hope your students will hold on to from this experience, of the work that you've done? And we can start anywhere. I think Norca, you look ready.
I think about the fact that we told high school seniors, after giving them 10 days of exposing them 10 days and discussing this topic with them, and we told them, go home, you're starting college in a month, but guess what? You're going to do homework. You're going to research. You're going to meet on chats or wherever, and you're going to prepare for a symposium. Honestly, I didn't believe they would do it. I thought classes are going to begin and they're going to say, we're not ready. We forgot. We don't know what to do. Those young people came so sharp. One of the assistant provosts was there. She was shocked. She was like, you all didn't work with them? I'm like, no, we gave them the class. We told them to go back home, research, and come back. It was amazing. And that's one of the reasons why I say there's no way I can go back to how things were, right? So the value in this, I don't think we understand the deep value in this, and we may never get to see it until years to come, when these children and young people then say to us, hey, you remember when you taught me this, or when we discussed this? I think that's when we're going to be able to wrap our heads around the great value of all these initiatives for this generation. And it will save this country. I love it. Yes.
I continue to be in awe by the connections that students were able to make. Again, we've only done our 1619 curriculum for 1 year, so this is our second year. And even from last year to this year, last year, the connections were mainly between themselves and the characters in the book. We read the first 5 poems the first quarter, and then the next 5 the second quarter, and so on. And so they were just like, like, oh, I have a language, and people in Dongo had a language, or I dance. But then this time they were able to really make connections culturally to not only themselves, but between. They were like, oh, the Europeans invaded the Africans and Dongo and took them, just like they invaded the New World and took over. And this was a first grader being able to make that connection. So I was really excited by how students are able to make these connections, and their level of conversation has really gotten deeper and more rich from engaging in different thinking routines.
Thank you so much. Yes, Stacey.
This is all so good. I think as we look at changing narratives, we're changing narratives in the minds of future generations. So everything they say from this point forward, they will now walk through life with the lies that we have now dispelled. We've replaced that truth with something substantial that they can hold on to. So they will not be in the space of continuing to carry out a perception of themselves, a perception of our country, a perception of truth around this topic that is barely spoken about. And that's the dramatic piece, right? We're talking about the unspeakable and giving language and history and context and value to it. So that's, I think, the ball that's rolling, Norca. We don't know what the long-term effect is going to be yet, because the way these kids communicate today, they can reach across the world because they're on TikTok. So who knows? The sky's the limit, and we're excited for that, to be part of that and to watch it and see what happens.
Absolutely. And Nia, yes.
Yeah, so I don't get the opportunity to interface directly with students. So this really comes from a conversation I had with a facilitator about getting to the process of merging student creativity with history and with agency and telling narratives. So when he would tell the kids first to draw a picture, it'd be like drawing a picture of a dog. And he was trying to figure out, how do I merge their creativity with them feeling like they can tell a story and they have the opportunity to take what they're learning and do something creative with it. I think he noticed that these kids hadn't necessarily been given that opportunity, which he teaches middle school. So you would think, they just got out of elementary school. There's a lot of art projects and things, but then those art projects don't always necessarily coincide clearly with them with history. But to be able to tap into that creative bone and that agency at that young age, I think is really, really powerful. And yeah, to the point that Norca was making earlier, I think we teach kids all sorts of things, and we throw things and hope, whatever sticks, sticks. But I think the point of doing it is exposure, because whatever happens in their lives next that we can't control, there's something that may resonate that you have no idea what resonated with them. And they look back and say, actually, I first learned about that in this class, or that's the first person who taught me that. They then learn that people don't have that opportunity. So it is about trusting and knowing that in years to come, that the fruits will continue to bear and to grow.
Thank you. And I am so sad to end it, but I think that's a great ending point for us. A beautiful thing for us to carry into the world. Thank you so much to each of our panelists for this brilliant conversation. And thank you to our audience. Beautiful questions, for your attendance, for your attention. Our final showcase event is our closing keynote with Dr. LeGarrette King, and that begins in 15 minutes at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time. So you have a moment to step away, take care of human needs, and come back at 5:15. We hope you will join us for that conversation. Thank you all so much.